Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Jager. I'm an account manager here at Ardham Technologies, and I have the pleasure of introducing Chris Maines, our managing director, who has been with Ardham Technologies for 8 years. Chris has been in the IT industry since 1995 and brings a wealth of information and to subjects such as this. Chris has led our engineering services team. He's built our security offerings, and he also provides security consulting to our clients. So for today's webinar, Chris is going to be focusing on personal security and privacy and how our habits impact overall security of your organization. As you know, everybody is connected to the internet, and there's a lot of scary things out there. So we're hoping that today's presentation will be very valuable in terms of information that you can take with you and share with your teams on how to really protect yourself when out there on the internet. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Chris Maines to you. And Chris, take it away, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. To kind of expand a little bit more on what Anthony said, as we are approaching business as well as security of our business practices, one thing that I have observed over the many years of consultations I've completed is how can we expect our teams to be mindful of our security and privacy practices within our organizations if they're not even necessarily doing it themselves. So one of the initiatives I've worked through over the last couple of years is trying to bring the focus more towards a human aspect and user enablement perspective, as opposed to just trying to throw money at a problem. So with that all said, we'll start kind of kicking through this slide deck. Feel free to interrupt me. I love having conversations. I love seeing these webinars kind of go in any direction that you guys feel appropriate. I want to make sure that this is tailored for all of you. So as we move in, I always have to pick some clever quote to kind of present to everybody, just to kind of get into a flow. Sometimes I'm humorous, sometimes I'm not. This one is a quote from Edward Snowden, ultimately saying that you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different from saying you don't care about freedom of speech because you have nothing to say. This is incredibly pointed when we're approaching our own privacy. Just because you may not necessarily be concerned about what you are sharing, it may be more impactful to people outside, or even who you interact with or who you do business with. So it kind of kickstarts into this dialogue where security has really become an industry buzz term, almost completely washed out. And when we're looking at that, we've instilled into our work cultures that nothing is ever completely secure anymore. And it is fairly true. With that said, understanding that the value of being security forward, though still there, but it's been somewhat washed out from a marketing perspective, we want to look at maintaining the privacy of the information that we hold, as well as the privacy of the information that applies to us and what the grander impact is. Your ability to protect your family, your job, and your home are influenced around how you approach your privacy. Are we deal with people day in and day out that may feel comfortable telling social media that they're going on a trip to the Bahamas, but if we look back 10, 15 years ago, they were even putting out news bulletins saying don't do that because people will know when you're not at home and breaking in. But it's also more indicative to kind of know where you are at that current moment, where you are the most easily manipulated. That's just one example across a myriad of them. Now, the sad fact of the matter is, our information has already been gathered. A good portion of our information has been gathered and been resold. A great example of that one is I just recently went through purchasing a home, and I swear, day after signing my contract and putting in my pre-approval, I was starting to get phone calls from banks. They move lightning fast at this point, and it's all within the T's and C's associated with the agreements that we're going into. But even more so is the organizations are gathering your browsing information, whether you're looking at like Zillow or uh, realtor websites. They're gathering your point of information so that they can target you, and not necessarily target you from a malicious standpoint. It is more so to target you for their own benefit, though not malicious. That information is still there to be taken and used eventually maliciously. Now, the great question is, what is the point if my information is already sold and used? The point is to really kind of keep eyes on it. And that is ultimately what you need to do is maintain, uh, keep eyes on it, but also understand when, where, and how, and the purpose behind when you're volunteering that information. Now, but I don't really like building a whole lot of slides, so I'm going to be somewhat paced and I'm going to create a little bit of air from time to time. If somebody has something to interject, I'm about to flip over to the next slide. Please feel free to pop up a thought, feeling, emotion. If you want to throw a brick at me, I'm here for it. Okie doke. Well, we'll move on to the next slide. The uncomfortable truths of our data footprint currently is that there currently is no exact number of how many unique records are being sold currently. And when I'm talking about being sold, I'm talking about being sold from marketing purposes, from customer analysis perspectives, but also from malicious perspectives. When we're talking about information being sold right now, we can't necessarily quantify the stuff that is legally gathered and legally shared and sold between private organizations. What makes it even more difficult is the even more sensitive information that is currently within the unindexed web and the unindexed databases. Those marketplaces change very regularly as far as where you can look for that information. Some of that information is not even necessarily publicized directly on those marketplaces or even available in those catalogs. So it's nearly impossible to really get our arms around how much information has been exfiltrated around you. Now, we do have some statistics, but these statistics are completely volunteered information. Right. And I've been beating a lot of people over the head with this one. Was in 2024, we had an incident where 3 billion records were taken, and they were taken for malicious purposes. They have been exposed. They are for resale. They are out there. But that's one of the many reasons why we can't get a quantifiable number. But it's also a haunting message to state that our information is already out there. So what is the point of securing it if it's already out there? Uh, that always makes me a little bit sad to have to just blatantly state, considering I am the one that built our security offering, and I'm literally dissuading you from security products, but not necessarily from from the perspective of creating a false sense of security, but a realistic sense of security. Now, I do also want to note that not all information that has been gathered is malicious. And I know I've stated that a few times already. And they're using it for business, and we all want our businesses to grow. Organizations will buy these marketing lists from time to time, whether they are in sales focused or service focused. They're going to be gathering this information just so that they understand the clients that they're approaching or the individuals that they're marketing to or the industries that they're working with. It doesn't mean that they're doing anything malicious or they want to take advantage of you. They're doing it from a self-study. But when they acquire this information, however, that information exists on their systems. Their systems may be vulnerable. Their systems may not be under any form of governance or compliance regulations, or even if they are, you never know what their security stature is or their privacy stature is to hold that. A great opportunity to kind of call out a few of the big, I like to call them the big three, is Meta, Alphabet, Amazon. Um, but even Microsoft is partaking in all this, where they are they make a good portion of their revenue of gathering this information and being able to gather that information, compile that information, and then resell that information. Now, that information that is gathered, again, no ill intent, no malicious intent to gather that information, but it can be sensitive when you're posting pictures of your family on Facebook and uh, at a park by your house, your geolocation is potentially being exposed. That geolocation maybe is going to be tagged to the image unless you've disabled it. But if you're trying to share that in social media, or if you throw it into Google's amazing pictures viewer, it's going to gather it from that point of presence that you've been either triangulated off your cell phone tower or off of your home ISP to say, this is where this person was at that time. And the purpose of that is to create targeted marketing. Is really the root of it is to target the market so that when you're in a general vicinity of a Starbucks, if you're looking for coffee, it's going to take you to Starbucks. But that's how Google, Meta, and Amazon and Microsoft really make a sizable amount of their revenue is off of gathering that information and reselling it. It's non-tangible products now, and we've turned into that. Now, another spin to it all is even though it may not necessarily be for malicious purposes, and it may be a flaw or a bug within an ecosystem, and with no intent of even gathering that information, there are currently two very active class action lawsuits against Alphabet as well as Apple right now for um, application eavesdropping. So when you're saying, okay, Google, or I don't want to repeat the full phrase because I have Apple products, but you talk to Siri, um, they start listening. Well, both of them had been seen as eavesdropping and and gathering that information. And even though they're arguing that they are bugs within those ecosystems, it still gathered that information, and now that information exists. And now that the information exists, it can be sold, resold, or even potentially stolen. Now, I'm about to move on to the next slide. Does anybody have any thoughts, feelings, emotions?
Marketing over here is feeling a little bit called out, but good information there, Chris. Thanks.
Sorry, marketing. Well, I'll move on to the next slide. Now, I did kind of outline a number of opportunities where it may not necessarily be completely transparent to the end user as far as the information being gathered. Now, there are other areas that we have to be somewhat mindful of. As I was putting together this slide deck, and happenstance kind of popped up a few of these considerations that I did want to talk about. Um, like I said in the previous slide, organizations that are reselling your browsing habits, and that's probably the most obvious one that we experience. Everybody complains about the Google ads, or they're talking about fluffy puppies, and their Facebook now pops up ads and feeds for fluffy puppies. Um, we all know about that one, but people are still not keeping it front of mind, so they're still reacting on it. One of the sneaky things, and a lot of people have kind of looked at me very cross-eyed, and it's been more and more prevalent in this post-COVID era, is the prevalence of QR codes. I'll tell you point blank, when I go to a restaurant, they tell me to scan the code. I walk, they either need to give me a menu or I walk out. And it comes down to the URL transparency associated with QR codes. No, I haven't been able to prove anybody having me hop off of a relay and grabbing my cookies. But does that mean that it's not possible? No, it means it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for a lack of transparency from the providers to gather information. Again, it doesn't necessarily need to be malicious, but it's still out there, and I don't want people knowing about the tacos I ordered last week at the cantina down the road. I just want to see my order and place my order without anybody trying to do targeted marketing off of it. But furthermore, I don't want them to look at my other tabs I may have in my Chrome browser on my cell phone, or gather a list of names from my contacts, which is fully possible depending on how you've provisioned your cell phone. One thing that a lot of people, uh, and this really kind of this one kind of hit me pretty hard as I was shopping at Target, was store credit cards and store debit cards. We're incentivized at this point to use these tools because they'll give us 3-5% back, and that saves us on sales tax and makes shopping a lot cheaper. But organizations are not built to give away money or give away their revenue or their profits. So they may make it look like they're giving you something free, but at that point, what you've essentially done is you've consented for. I'll pick on Target because I shop at Target all the time. When I use my Target Red card, they know exactly what I've purchased in store and online, and they've created a database to either resell or even target more products within their product line, within their product suite. Again, they're not doing anything wrong. I'm thankful for that 3 to 5% off. It's great. It saves me so much money. But now that information is stored of, the boneless chicken breasts I bought at the store last week is now available to be resold. Though that may not necessarily be pertinent or really pointed, but it allows for people to start actually creating a circle of understanding to either mimic me or take advantage of me or gather more information about me to really understand my location and what I'm doing at what times and even my habits. And my habits are incredibly predictable. So, um, the less information that they know, the better it is for me. Now, of course, we're going to talk about phone applications. I mean, we all love playing Candy Crush and stuff like that. We probably all of us in the room probably understand that they're gathering how long we're playing those games and how many ads pop up in it, and the ads are being provided by something other than the software developer. But when we're talking about our kids at home and they're downloading Candy Crush or Number Munchers or whatever the new trend is as far as free phone application games, they're gathering information about our kids. They're gathering information about us, and that's something that really needs to be kind of driven home, because if we allow for that at home, what's keeping someone in accounting from downloading some accounting calculator potentially that's free, that's getting those ads? Now they're tied to a specific position, and then they can be correlated with other data breaches to say, oh, they are the comptroller for XYZ company. Now we know that that is a high valued asset, and that means that we can either sell it for a high value or take advantage of the opportunity to catch this person in their blind spot. I also mentioned in the um, last slide about the class action lawsuits against Alphabet, Google, and Apple, as far as their eavesdropping. We talked about that, but that's also not the only organization that's currently under a lot of class action about data privacy. and making sure that that information is secured and held in the high regard that we would hope our own privacy is. I always like to remind everybody that I speak to, and I actually stole this quote from our CEO, Jay Swainson. Nothing is free. You either pay with money or your information. He uses you're either buying the product or you're the product, but you kind of get the same gist of it. And that being said, and looking at that concern, we see a lot of applications that right now are heavily AI driven, and there's very loose lips when it comes down to uh, what we type into those AI bots. That information is going to be resold to keep the processing alive. That's going to keep the memory alive and keep everything upgraded. Nothing is really free anymore, and we have to admit that, and we have to understand that since nothing is free anymore, and really very little is private or secured anymore, we have to take kind of an aggressive standpoint. We are no longer trying to do this from a defensive perspective, but more from an offensive perspective. All right, the floor is kind of open before my next slide. Anything? All right, we'll move on to the next one. Now, as I was working through all this, and I mean, I'm a nerd by trade. Like Anthony said, I've been in the industry since '95. So acronyms are now my new version of language. So as I was working through this, I drew up on my whiteboard really areas of concern for individual enablement and where the most impact and where we need to be the most mindful of. And in the process, I scribbled down financial concerns, familial concerns, and identity concerns. And I came up with my really sweet acronym of FFI. So I'm going to be using that. If you guys are going to be speaking to me on any engagements, don't be surprised if I just drop it into the acronym soup at some point. I will give bonus points for anybody that catches me on it. So don't be afraid to call me out and say, "Ha, I remember where you made up that acronym." But this isn't an industry acronym, but this is something that I created. And when we started looking at these exposures of financial, familial, um, and identity, we can come with that center overlap of you. At the end of the day, all these are the greatest, most important things in your life, really. Your financial stability, whether it's your bank account information, loan details, like I outlined a little bit earlier about uh, how my experience through purchasing a new home recently, um, and even utility details. Those can be all out there and very greatly impactful to your overall individual net wealth or your financial stability or whether your kids can go to college or not. Those are all things that can absolutely impact directly those aspects of your life, and they hit you very close to home because you end up having to carry it on your shoulders. Then, of course, familial concerns. We talk about the overall safety of our parents, our partners, our children. Um, but how can we really be mindful of that if we're already putting out in the world where we are? And whether it's either through social media or even using your Target Red Card, say, yeah, Chris bought this chicken breast at the Pflugerville Target off of I-130 on Sunday. That's still telling a point of presence. So at that point, how is my home secure if people already know that I'm going to be away during that time every week at that location? So that's obviously a concern. Then, of course, and this is something that does kind of hit close to home because I've had family members run into these incidences where their full identity was taken, not from the perspective of financial manipulation, but from actually assuming an identity. when I'm talking about assuming an identity, these are things that people can run into legal issues, credit issues, even professional licensure issues, and most pointedly, citizenship issues. And it's not that you're going to be deported, right? It's more so that people have taken your information, your private identifiable information, and have resold it to give somebody legality or paperwork appropriate to be existent in this country. And I'm not talking about it from the hyper paranoid perspective um, of these people are coming over for malicious needs, malicious wants. We know that many of these families come over because they have to, for very social and economic reasons in their home countries. Uh, but they need an identity so that they can make money, that they can actually function in this world, and that they can actually build a life for their family that they're trying to protect themselves. So uh, that information is out there. That information is either gathered to create a facade and a lifestyle for that information, but for that individual. But also, it'll tell regions where you may not be, where you may not ever have come across that overlap or risk. Now, of course, I mean, we can go into the more negative aspect of that as legal ramifications, and I've bared witness of a number of people that have fallen victim to identity theft, where they received charges in a different state that they never had been to because somebody else had all that falsified information, and it was very pertinent. The individual that was arrested had a birth certificate, had a driver's license, had a social security card. They even had mortgages out under that name, but that's more of the financial concern. But these are all very pointed issues, and when you start looking at the different islands of information, whether it is that sensitive social security information, all the stuff that we've been trying to secure over the last 30, 40 years, um, it's not just that, and we're able to now piece together an entire human identity from both financial and identity, so that people can move forward and use your information that may not be necessarily meant to be malicious, but to be, but in a way that impacts you very negatively. All right. I'm about to go into my last slide, so if anybody has anything to say, please feel free to speak up.
I have a quick question, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was recently the victim of account takeover on my bank account, which has been
Mhm,
something fun that I've been dealing with.
mhm,
But I'm thinking about this from the context of that password that I used was an entirely unique password.
mhm,
However, every time I log into like my passwords app on my iPhone, I get the notification like this password has been part of a breach. This password has been part of a breach. The data, blah blah blah. Like seemingly every single website. And so I've been
mhm,
trying to be good about making sure that every website has a unique password associated with it, so that way they
mhm.
can't try to take over everything. Um,
Yeah.
so essentially, whenever I see those notifications, because I think that I would spend all day, every day fighting that battle of trying to update passwords if I was constantly doing that. And so what I do is like if I see that and I know that it's a unique password, I just leave it alone. I mean, is there a better way to be dealing with those situations?
Well, there's a number of ways of approaching that, and I mean we can go to the IT guy's way of managing our passwords, which is make sure on monthly or tri-monthly basis a reset of all your passwords, updating those, and I mean that can be very, 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 very laborious. Um, I mean, really validate it, evaluate what your exposure is within any given app. Now, you had an account takeover. That's something that I typically go at a little bit more of a heady hand. personally. And one of the things that is very much lost on personal accounts and people forget on personal accounts is that your password isn't the only thing that grants access. Yes, you can get 2FA, you can get multi-factor authentication into it, but another way to create a little bit of obscurity to your identity is change your username too. So as you're moving through and changing your passwords, sometimes it is wise to even cycle through your uh, the username or the credentials, both of all of the credentials that you are approaching these applications with. Um, Now, not all providers make it really easy to, and sometimes you have to call in. But when you start looking at it, you look at, let's say you have, we'll just say you're super fancy and you have like an American Express Black Card, right? That if at that point it would make sense to even invest a couple hours of time to make sure that you are cycling everything possible to just create that obscurity to who Tessa is and how to gain access to Tessa. Now, you're going to get those pop-ups, and I get those pop-ups even on my cell phone because I have my more ridiculous. I call them my dumb passwords, my unsecured passwords. I get those pop-ups all the time, and yeah, they're part of data breaches, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that it was your record taken, but the password is out there, and somebody used the same password. Now, there's at that point, you now have a the attacker has a dictionary file, and if they find out your name and they have enough time and patience, they can run through that entire list of passwords using your username and just running through everybody's password without prejudice, and then they're able to get in. And that's one of the big reasons why I say don't even be afraid to cycle your username at this point. Cycle username, cycle password, and even cycle your multi-factor authentication if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to take too much time on this, but I do think that it's really interesting because that was sort of what I ended up having to do. I created an all new email address because I did have multi-factor authentication set up via email, and that password was also its own unique password. But they also had a passphrase that you had to give over the phone, and yet somehow
Mhm.
they got into this like 3 different times, kept reopening the account. It's been an actual disaster. I can only assume that it's a breach on the financial institution, considering the fact that I've been monitoring all of my, my credit, all of my other accounts, making sure that nothing has gone on there. And anyways, so it's been an interesting process.
Yeah, be sure to lock all your credit files right now.
Yeah.
And there is a potential that it is a breach. You may want to even consider. You may even want to consider like changing your institution because, and this
Oh,
is
that's my
something that
plan.
and that is something that um, I don't really cite in here too much about is, you know, really organizational ethics is incredibly critical. I know being in IT and the vast majority of us being in IT and working within IT, we have seen a lot of organizations that have really kind of faltered on really standing behind their customers and instead pushing to either sell a product or maintain their revenue streams at the detriment of at the detriment of the customer or the people that they're serving. So always be very pay close attention to how organizations treat you and how organizations have treated others. That means paying attention to the news. And if they're not in alignment where you feel comfortable, just move. It's a free market. So just move on from it. That is something that even at Ardham, we work with organizations that we can trust, and we push away organizations that have shown a little bit lower moral value, for lack of better terms, or lower ethics as they approach taking care of the customer or the business. Thank you, Tessa.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you to everybody in the chat as well.
So I have something that's also kind of interesting. So like Firefox recently has changed their ruling on selling data.
Mhm.
So I don't know if anybody saw that in the news. I know it got it hit my feed pretty quickly after they changed that. So they'll be selling your data now, even though beforehand they said they will never sell your data.
And it's great that you point that out, because all of us that have been in the industry are familiar with DuckDuckGo, and they pretty much did the exact same last year. Was they're like, well, we're never going to sell your information. Well, we're selling it now.
Yeah, so far with my research, the only thing I've been able to find that are similar to what Firefox was, because I've been a user of Firefox for like 20 years,
Mhm.
is Brave, but their view on crypto is a little dubious at best.
Yeah, I personally use Brave day in and day out, but I'm not signed up for any of their mining, any of their incentive programs. I just run. Uh, I do use Brave, but I have no hooks into it, and that's the only way to avoid it. But they still try to tempt you, right? All right. So, thank you all. Thank you so much for that engagement. I really appreciate that. So, how do I protect myself? And it really kind of comes down to awareness. And when I say awareness, it's not just having your like identity protection insurance or identity protection monitoring. It really kind of comes down to really kind of paying attention to current events, trying to see what's happening within the world around us. Uh, Listen, really actively listen to everybody that's around you, and get their perceptions. Take them as a data point so you can make an intelligible decision on which where it's safe to share what information. Um, even though I kind of called out identity protection, it's almost impossible at this point to not expect at some point in our lives our identity to be taken, or to be leveraged in any way, shape, or form. Um, Most credit card companies, I know my Discover card has identity insurance. Um, get in on that. I can tell you that the litigation fees can be quite expensive when it comes back to reassuming your identity. Um, so make sure that you're already suffering potentially a financial impact or a familial impact. Lean on those organizations to close the gap, so it's one less thing that you have to worry about as you start trying to clean up the mess left behind. Um, Always think twice when you see something is free. Oh, somebody raised their hand. I'm sorry.
Hey, Chris, this is Anthony.
Hey,
Um,
Anthony.
yeah, great presentation. I don't mean to pile on, but I would like to share. Um, we recently were contacted from a vendor, and all the phone apps that you have on your phone are
Mhm.
collecting telemetry data and GPS data on you as well. So
Yep.
I would say if you have an app that you're not using, just clean those things up to just the bare minimum of what you actually need, because they came to us offering to tell us, we can give you data for everybody that's been at, X, Y, and Z in the last 30 days. And I was like, well, how are they getting that data? And they said, oh, we buy it from all the phone app vendors. They sell all that data, and then this
Mhm.
company collects it, mines it, and enriches it, and then resells it. So
Yep.
it's really overwhelming, when you think about it, what is all going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because we don't. There's not a lot of transparency when you have these apps open. They're constantly communicating,
Yeah.
and they hide behind their little wall of being unjailbroken or unrooted phones, but they're still selling that information.
Yeah, so if it's not, in your face with an ad, it's in the back end where they're
Hmm.
making their money too. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I appreciate that, Anthony. Thank you.
Sure.
Um, and to kind of carry on with what Anthony was just saying. Companies are not in the business to give things away. They'll always find a way to make profit, whether it's going to be gathering your telemetry or understand that they've been at a certain restaurant X number of times, or their overall traveling habits. All that information is being gathered and resold. And I mean, if we understood how much each record was being resold for, we'd all feel a little bit dirty of how cheap our identities are to these individuals. But at the end of the day, even though it's not necessarily malicious, that information exists and it could be potentially used maliciously, maybe not by the company gathering it, but by whoever's going to take it. I tell a lot of organizations, there's three types of organizations that exist right now. Organizations that have suffered a compromise and are now closed. Organizations that have suffered a compromise and were able to recover. And then there's organizations that have not been hit yet. With that being said, it's not to necessarily scare your individual organizations, but to really bring awareness that the organizations that are gathering this information, they're one of those, they're going to be one of those three. Well, one of the last two, because they'd be closed by now. But they're going to have that information and it's going to be already out there, or it's going to be out there. And I even just stated that. Another concern, and I had it in my notes on a previous slide and I failed to kind of bring it up, was even when it comes down to organizational compromises, we've gotten really kind of relaxed on the information that is in front of us, and we inspect to digest it through certain comfort channels, right? So we'll hear about, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of organization that's been impacted on a global scale instead of picking on local. I mean, we'll just pick on like Presbyterian from a couple of years ago. Presbyterian uh, hospital system in Albuquerque. Uh, they did disclose. They showed high upstanding ethics as they approached that compromise. However, there's organizations that don't. They try to sweep it under the rug. So if they have not, there's a potential that your information had been taken in a compromise that has never been disclosed, and we don't know about it. So it's all about trying to keeping eyes on self, um, in any way, shape, or form. If you hear rumors, those rumors typically have a little bit of founding behind it, but it at least gives you an area to keep an eye on yourself, right? So we just want to make sure that we pay close attention to that. And like I said previously, it's not if, it's when. Um, it's bound to happen to one of us, um, and probably one of us in this webinar has already suffered, where our information has been taken. Well, all of us have had our information taken and marketed. Maybe one of us in this webinar has had it taken and used for malicious purposes. So we have to be mindful of it and have our game plans of how, one, to keep an eye on it and how to recover from it. With that all said, um, that is the conclusion of my word vomit. So please, I'm not ending this. I like having an open floor. If you have uh, thoughts, feelings, or even want to call me out on anything, I'm completely open to it. This security and privacy is always evolving, and more points of input only help to improve me.
Thanks, Chris. And I will say, just in speaking with you, not just today, but in general, I've become so much more wary and cognizant about what I am sharing online and how I'm sharing it and how it could potentially be used and who may have access to it, et cetera, et cetera.
That's all we can do is open our eyes and just see what it is for what it is, right? Well, thank you all. I really do appreciate your time today. Um, Tessa, I saw you come off of mute. Would you like to do the closing?
Well, I was just going to let everybody know, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we will be following up via email afterwards, and I will be including a recording of the webinar as well, if there's anybody else within your team or your family that you'd like to share it with. Well, thank you all. We'll end it here. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.